Then we can begin chatting a little.
Yeah, good idea.
Never mind. Turning off my cell phone. So I got a message from Mario saying that he's traveling again. That's why he has been absent. He has not been with us. Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Uchibeda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Tatguru Pranatosh Maham Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti Om. Namaste. And welcome to our class on Vivekachudamani. We continue from the verse 45, how to discriminate the self and the not self. So as we know, Viveka means exactly discrimination. So how to discriminate the self and the not self is the very, very center subject of this text written by, or taught by, or present by Shankaracharya. The verse 45 says that he is free who separates the unassociated, actionless, innermost self, the subject, from the whole host of objects, as the pith is separate from the munja grass. He is free who resolves everything in the self and stays by knowledge as that very self. So this is a very rich verse. It talks about the Jnani who is free, and the freedom comes from the separation or discrimination between our nature as the self, as consciousness, that which is free from any association, free from any modification, free from any action, as we know. So this, our very nature as consciousness, needs to be intellectually discriminate or separate, as it says here. He is free who separates our nature, the very nature as the self, that which has actually never been associated to anything. It appears as if it gets associated to a body, to a mind, and numerous other objects, but in fact, the self never gets associated to anything. Okay? This innermost self. What is this self? This self is the subject conscious existence principle, which is not an experiencing entity. So it's the witnessing subject, non-experiencing principle, which is not an entity. So it is the conscious principle by which the jiva, this object with three bodies, becomes the knower, becomes the experience witnessing jiva Okay, but this where we are is the limitless, actionless, unassociated, innermost self, the subject witnessing conscious principle, which is in fact never really associated to anything. It just illumines the world and then it appears as if it becomes the jiva, but it does not associate, not even with its jivas, you know. It is absolutely unassociated from the whole host of objects. So the first object being the body-mind complex. So when the body-mind complex has this means, you know, this medium of knowledge experience, this object, it's so easy for this object to take on and say, I am this self, I am Atma, I am I am the self. There is only this self, and I am somehow this combination of this matter, this body, and this phenomenon called my mind, my human consciousness. So this self, this is the primary object, and then all other objects are perceived by this object called the jiva. So the one who is free is the one who discriminates this actionless, unassociated conscious existence principle from the body, mind, and all objects. The same way the pith. How you spell that, Mark? The pith? Pith?
The pith.
Pith. Okay.
Yeah.
So as the pith is separated from the munja grass, the munja grass, the scripture says, is a grass that it's hard, it has thorns, but if you manage to break it and to open it, it said that inside of that grass there is a nice sweet nectar that is delicious. It's really, really wonderful, you know, to enjoy. But in order to get to that nectar, we need to go very, very carefully, you know, separating, you know, the outside, this hard, you know, covering until we get to the nectar of the munja grass. So the same way we need to do this discrimination. And why this analogy? Why this analogy? Because this discrimination is something that we need to do very carefully. We need to do patiently, attentively. We cannot rush about that. If we rush, we just cut our fingers, we hurt ourselves, and we don't come to desired result. We need to be patient. We need to have our qualifications in place and keeping doing this separation until we get to the nectar of it, you know? So we need to do. That's why there is this, in more than one occasion, some of our Upanishad presents this analogy of the munja grass and the nectar that resides inside it, which is very difficult to get into it, but yet it has to be done by separating, you know, all this exterior aspect of the grass until we get to the soft nectar which is inside. So this yan is free, who resolves everything in the self. Again, we go back to that notion. At the end, this yan is free when he really resolves everything back to the self. He resolves everything in the self. He resolves the body, the mind, every object, all other creatures, everything is resolved as the self. Not only to resolve everything into the self, but by knowledge, he stays as that very self. That's very beautiful. This is what it means, direct self-knowledge. Because we need to make this discrimination, we need to separate the self from the objects that appear within the self. But in the end, it's not enough that we discriminate, you separate, that we reject the object. We need to we need to we need to cling, not cling. I have been talking so much Italian and Portuguese lately. we need to claim our identity as the very self that we have separate, we have isolate the self. We discriminate, we separate, and then we had to claim our identity, our true nature as the self, not as the object jiva. We need to claim. So therefore, we need to understand that everything is the self. Everything is resolved into the self. It's just a superimposition on the screen of this conscious self, this conscious existence. There's nothing apart of this consciousness. But yet, we need to know that everything is the self, but the self is not everything, okay? So in the end, I have to establish my identity and claim my identity as that very self. So that's the point there. With this verse, the teacher begins to unfold the main practice of Vedanta. We know that Vedanta, the most important tool, the most important sadhana, the most important practice of Vedanta is Viveka, is discrimination between Satya and Mithya, between the subject and the object, the self and the not self, or the appearance self. So this is the core, this is the very, very fundamental of Vedanta, no? Viveka, discrimination. Much has been said so far to distinguish the nature of the self from the not self. The student is now told that this knowledge has to be put into practice ceaselessly is quite something, So now we are getting to the work, and we need to understand that this work is a work that has to be done diligently, systematically, persistently, carefully, patiently, ceaselessly. In other words, it has to become the main project of one's life. It has to be, everything else has to be, go around it. And this has to be the main purpose of life. So that's what it means, mumukshutva. Mumukshutva is when this is the main focus of your life. My life is about self-knowledge and freedom. I want to really get it right. I want to know who or what I am. And I want this knowledge to be clear to the extent that it can isolate me from the shocks that come from life. So I want to be well established as the limitless eternal consciousness, which is my nature. This verse is pointing to that, and it's pointing to the fact that this has to be a main purpose, and this has to be put into practice, into application all the time. If bondage is our goal, if bondage is to be overcome, so provided we really want self-knowledge and moksha, and then we have to give everything into it. We have formed the habit of identifying ourselves with the self with thoughts, which are various and ever-changing. This identification is the source of our unhappiness, as we know. Why we get unhappy when we identify with thoughts and objects? Because they change. And every effort we have into trying to find this resolution of our lives, by interacting, transacting with the world of objects, we want to do that, trying to find what? Trying to find stability, security, peace. You understand? We want to find something that we can grab and hold and say, okay, now I find things are cool, things are stable, and things are safe, So we want to do that. But we suffer. We suffer why? Because all objects and all thoughts, they are just moving and changing from one moment to another. It's a flux of constant change. So we want to find the changeless in the field of objects, which is a flux of continuous change. We're never going to find the changeless, the eternal, the stable, the secure. You understand? So we have this habit of identifying with thoughts and objects. Thoughts and objects are two sides of the same phenomenon. And by these objects are ever changing, and it gives us no sense of stability or security. We want stability. This text begins saying that it's the source of security and joy. Once we do this work, and then we realize we get properly established as our true nature as the self, which is the source of security and joy. Security and joy. Everybody wants security and everybody wants joy, but that will never be found in the changing world of objects. How can we find peace and security and stability if when we think that, okay, now I got security, I got it, and then something happens in the field, in the world, in the other side of the planet or whatever, and then there goes my stability. There goes my peace of mind. This identification is the source of our trouble, of our unhappiness. It is the source of our never-ending seeking. We seek because we are seeking in the wrong place. We are seeking there in a place where there is no security because things are not real. What is not real is something that was not before and will not be in the future, but it's temporarily appearing to be. So we go there, and then we cannot really find any peace. And then we keep moving from one object to another object. It's a never-ending seeking. So it's the source of our unhappiness and the source of our seeking. I mean, we all probably heard already that one of the most important mark of self-recognition, self-realization, is that one comes to that point and they say, whoa, now, how could I have missed that before? You understand? Why I was still looking for myself? Why I was still seeking myself? So self-recognition, it marks the end of seeking, because you found what you were looking for. And then you even get to say, oh my God, how could I have missed that? Because I'm so self-evident, I'm shining, and I'm looking for myself, searching myself, and I'm the light, doing the search, doing the seeking, and so on. So it brings about the end of seeking. This is the most common thing that everybody reports, Claudio, don't go in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Huh? It is this unhappiness which has brought us to Vedanta. No? So we are not happy. We haven't found happiness because happiness can never be found in samsara. Oh no, I came to Vedanta, but I'm so happy that I just came out of happiness. It's BS, because happiness can never be found in samsara. Can never be found in people, place, things, circumstances, situations, wealth, fame, and will never be found. So if people think that I come to Vedanta because I'm too happy, too joyful, so that therefore now I came to Vedanta. No, we come because we have tried so hard to solve this situation, and we failed, and then we develop what? We develop maturity, the understanding that I will never find a solution if I search for something which is misplaced. I mean, I'm placing it in a place where it's not really there, you know. So indeed, it is this unhappiness which has brought us to Vedanta, which has brought us to our teachers. We are now told that this habit of identification with thought must be unlearned. In other words, this identification with thoughts and objects, this identification with the body-mind needs to be broken, needs to be somehow, removed, canceled, neutralized, destroyed, howsoever we want to say it. Okay? It must be unlearned. Unlearned is a nice way as well. We have learned by conditioning, repetition. Oh yeah, the body. Oh yes, oh you are beautiful, you are tall, you are young, you are old. The body, the body, the body, the body. So now we need to unlearn that. We have to say, I am the light, I'm the light, I'm the light, I'm the light, I'm consciousness, existence. But of course, it's not enough that we repeat that as a parrot, no? No, we need to really understand. We need to follow the logic and understand why we should trust this statement. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman and I'm free and independent and limitless and so on. We need to understand that. We need to be convinced somehow. This will not be easy as the simile of the munja grass makes plain. This grass has a tender inner stalk, but it is sheathed in a hard outer covering that can only be peeled back with great care and attention, lest we cut our fingers on its sharp edge. So it has very sharp edge, and it's very easy that we cut our fingers. So this is the analogy. This is not easily. It's like Ramji likes to say, it is very simple to understand the self, what is the self, and that you are the self. But to really internalize this knowledge, understand, and retain this knowledge, digest and internalize this knowledge, and retain that with full certainty is not easy. It's simple, but it's not that easy. Why? Because we have gone through lifetimes of conditioning that I the body, I the body, I the body, I the mind, I my notions, I my ideas. So it's not that easy. The same way it's not that easy to get to the nectar of the munja grass. The self must be constantly distinguished from the objects that appear in awareness. So we know that. We know that that is our practice again and again. We need to just reject anything that comes and disappears, appears and disappears. Anything that appears, it must be something other than myself, therefore it's an object. So I am not that, I am not this, I am not that. So the self must be constantly distinguished, discriminated from all thought objects that appear within my conscious awareness. It appears to me. Anything that appears to me, by definition, cannot be me, because there are only two principles operating in this universe. Is the subject principle and the object. If anything appears to me, by definition, it must be rejected, because I'm the seer of this experience. I'm the seer of this thought. I'm the seer of this emotion. I'm the seer of this state of mind, of this experience. Everything that shows up, I am the seer. Therefore, I'm not that, including my beautiful states, mental states, or whatever. my life circumstance. Everything is an object. Why? Because it can be seen, can be perceived and known by me. So this is our constant discrimination. Satya Mithya, subject-object, discrimination. The objects, like the outer covering of the munja grass, will cling to awareness and resist being peeled away. So this is the funny way to put things here. All these objects that we see appearing in the scope of our conscious awareness, it will appear as if they are clinging to awareness. And awareness, we are trying to say, no, get out, get away. I don't want you to be attached to me because I heard that I'm free, I'm independent, and I'm not associated to anything. So therefore, keep some distance there. No, it appears as if the objects are going to cling to awareness. Why? Because of this force of habit. We have attached ourselves to objects. Consciousness somehow appears as if got totally attached to the body-mind construct. And then the body-mind construct go and gets attached to the objects of the field. These objects serve the purpose to allow us to define ourselves. We define ourselves by our interaction with the field of objects, you understand? Other people and so on. So it appears as if these outer objects will be clinging to awareness. It's just a habit, of keeping these objects, or define myself through this object, the Jiva does. So we must be committed to a slow, steady process of distinguishing the self from the object. So this process is a gradual process and requires incredible certainty of commitment, resolve, decision. No, I'm here for this. I want to do that. So it has to be a patient, slow, gradual, steady process if I am to succeed. Because if I don't have that kind of attitude, being patient, I'm being persistent, and I'm being here for howsoever long it takes, I'm enjoying the process. I'm not doing this as a means. There is nothing more I want to do in life rather than just understand my free nature. So therefore, I am in this, and I'm this for as long as it takes. I'm committed. I'm fully dedicated. Therefore, there is no way I'm not going to succeed. That's the only way to success. Humbly giving everything to it, enjoying the process, never complaining. Oh, it's taking too long. Oh, it's 3 months I'm doing Vedanta, and I did not get enlightened yet. Now, we need to understand we are mature people. We know that we came to Vedanta. We know that it's very simple. When we are highly qualified, it's easy. But if we are not highly qualified, we need to develop the qualifications. But we can always keep in mind, but it's very simple. Once I get my qualifications in order, it's the simplest and easiest thing. So, but I have to develop my qualifications. My mind has somehow to develop those qualifications. Impatience or inattention will only result in lacerated fingers, cut fingers. That is the failure to separate the self from the not self. So if we are in a hurry, if we start rushing, and then we start hurting ourselves, we develop easily what is commonly known by, presented by Ramji as enlightenment sickness. It's the most common thing, Oh, no, I understood it. I'm the self. When you see, we are just superimposed mithya, the ego in the self, and we say, oh, okay, now I am the self. No, we don't want that. We don't want to cut our fingers. So the verse also stresses two facts of great significance. The self is actionless, as it says at the very beginning of the verse. The self is actionless, and the objects must be resolved not just in the self, but as the self. So in the beginning of that verse, it says the self, which is actionless, innermost self, free from any association. And in the end of the verse, it says that we need the yani, who is free, who separates this self, has also to resolve everything in the self as the self. The verse also stresses the two facts of great significance. The self is actionless, it does not do anything. And also that the objects must be resolved into the self as the self. Okay? So the self does not do anything. And then who is doing this work? Who is doing the discrimination? Huh? And who is going to resolve every object that was primarily rejected? Who is going to go back and just readmit all of those objects as the self and the self alone? So the jiva is the doer, the jiva is the inquirer, no? And we cannot deny that, otherwise no progress is possible. No discrimination is possible. We need to have an entity who does action, who does physical, verbal, and intellectual actions. In Vedanta requires intellectual actions, discrimination. The initial frustration some of us experience when we come to Vedanta arises from our tendency toward a muscular spirituality. We want a program, a to-do list, and so on. Hatha yoga, meditating, and special diet, and exercise, and then more yoga, and then chanting, and then kirtans, or whatever one wants to do. Meditation again. So we are very familiar with spiritual lifestyle when it's about doing, and experience the results of the doing. But when we come to the Vedanta, we have to understand that Vedanta is not about doing anything. Vedanta is about contemplating, understanding something. You need to follow the logic as presented by the scripture, contemplate, reflect until one understands and accepts those statements. So Vedanta is not something that can be pushed like that, as it says here, in a very rajasic manner. I want to tell me what I have to do. Often I have people telling me, okay, now, so what are we going to do now? It's not working. I need to do something. I have been experimenting as a fresh guru, and sometimes I even had to come up with mantras to give to people. Can you believe that? What am I doing? I present the class and so on. I say, I need to do something. Okay, and then take this mantra. One time I had to elaborate a long mantra, I had to be creative. And the person later on came back to me and said, man, you cannot believe it. The mantra works. I said, really? It's good to know that it works, So if we have too much rajas, we want to do something. We don't want to contemplate and understand. We need to do something. So with Vedanta, the point is that there's nothing really I have to do to transform, to become, to transcend, to reach, because as we know, we are that. I cannot become something that I am already. I cannot gain or accomplish something that I already own. You understand? So therefore Vedanta is about understanding that our nature is consciousness, which by the way is whole, full, and complete. That's our nature. So it's all about understanding. It's not about doing. Therefore, if we have too much rajas, we need to calm down. We have to understand now we came to Vedanta. We need to burn out some of these rajas, you know, converting these rajas into sattva, not into tamas. You know, we burn intelligently so that we can develop, you know, sattva, so that we can gradually decrease our action-oriented life, you know, karma, karma, karma. We had to reduce karma and then increase contemplation, study, contemplation. Yana, we decrease karma yoga and we increase yana yoga. So gradually, so we have to be patient. We simply have to clear up our rajas, our confusion. But this confusion has tremendous staying power and inertial force. It thrives on action, which is karma. And it is karma that keeps the well of samsara turning. Action. Oh, no, I want to do thing. If you want to do something, you are never going to come out of samsara. Because action, what happens? What's the problem with action? Luciana? What's the problem with action? Action brings about...
It creates karma.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Creates
actually
karma. So you...
problems with action as long as you do the actions to the in compromise with the whole environment and do not let that influence you. I don't know. That's what I learned at least.
Yeah. So the problem with action, as Mark was saying, is that it produces results. You understand? And the result of action is always an experience. So you produce action, and then you're going to produce what? A vasana. If you do an action and you produce a result, and the result is a result, something that you like a more peaceful state of mind, what do you have now? You have a vasana for that action because you have enjoyed that state of mind. But if you do an action that produces an undesirable desire, the same way now what you are left with, I'm left with a vasana of adversity, of fear towards this kind of action that produce. So we are caught up in the cause and effect cycle called samsara. You understand? So when we rather than doing things to gain a result which is an experience, we take our time to, rather than do things, to try to understand, reflect, contemplate. And then what is the result of contemplation? The result of contemplation is not an experience. The result of the contemplation is understanding, is knowledge. You understand? So, and knowledge is the only thing that can free us from samsara. Because we are not here just to gain scientific knowledge. We are here to get self-knowledge. The knowledge in respect, regarding my true nature, which is free and limitless. So that is the fundamental difference. Karma keeps the wheel of samsara turning over and over and over. Action, results of actions, and then more of the same vasana. And the vasana is going to appear in my conscious mind as a desire or fear that's going to compel me to do more action, which is going to produce the result that's going to reinforce that vasana. You understand? Of course, we can do a lot of actions, as you were saying, Luciana. We can do good actions, scientific action, dharma actions, and these good actions, they are designed to offset those vasanas that were working against my spiritual growth. I can also do actions aiming to the result, and the result of these actions is good vasanas. You understand? So that is what we do as karma yogis. We want to act in the world with a certain, doing certain actions. Karma yoga is made of karma actions and yoga. So we need to do proper action And yoga goes to a proper attitude. When we combine these two sides of Karma Yoga, proper action, sattvic, dharmic action, with a proper attitude, an attitude. And this attitude is not an attitude only towards the action, but most important, a good attitude, a proper attitude towards the results. Because we can have a nice attitude. Yes, this is my action, and it's in gratitude. It's with the spirit of giving and not taking. It's the spirit of contribution and so on. But we have to also remember, and furthermore, whatsoever results comes back to me, I take as prasada with the same attitude of gratitude. You understand? And thankfulness. So it's an action that is done in a sattvic, dharmic way with attitude in regards to the action itself and its result. So these kind of actions, they are really important, Luciana. You understand? They are very important. We cannot escape action. We cannot live, only contemplate, unless we have all our qualifications in line developed. If we are really highly qualified, and then we can say, okay, forget about action. If you don't have children, you don't have a husband, you don't have a business, you don't have it, just use your time, go somewhere, find a cave, find a forest, find an ashram, and then since you don't have rajas, you just have a lot of stuff, just contemplate. Don't get into any action. But if we don't have that highly qualified intellect, and then we need to do action, but this action have to be done proper action with a proper attitude. Proper attitude towards the action, the results of the action, and then we are living our life and developing mental preparedness, mental purification, mental preparation, mental elevation. Okay? But if we keep doing action only for the sake of enjoying the results of the positive result of action is called punya. If my punya is some personal benefit, I want to enjoy some sort of good result. And then I'm caught up into this cycle, some sort of cycle. I never move. Understand? So, but if I am a Karma Yoga, so what is the results that I'm aiming? That's why it's nice we talk about Karma Yoga here, because we have Luciana that is relatively new to Vedanta. So when we become a Karma Yogi, we do dharmic, sattvic actions, and it is in harmony with Dharma, and I want my actions also to be proper, with a proper attitude, and I want them to be in harmony, aligned with my goal, which is I want to do this action to gain something else. You understand? For example, you want to do an action because you want to pass an exam to get a better job. So you need to keep that goal in mind, But as a Karma Yogi, our primary goal is not the personal benefit in regards to any samsaric or not samsaric, mundane, benefit. My primary goal is mental and spiritual growth, purification. Because when we act with that spirit, with that attitude, we don't know, I want to get that job, but most importantly, I want to develop mental purity. I want to enjoy this course of action with a beautiful attitude, taking the results with the same beautiful attitude, doing the right thing and being free and enjoying this freedom of being a Karma Yogi. Because my primary goal is mental purification. You understand? So there is a place to actions. I'm saying that for you because there is a place to action, but there is no action that's going to produce moksha. But we need actions in general to produce the mental purification that's going to allow us to go for moksha. You understand? Moksha is only possible by the understanding that I am already moksha. I am already freedom. You understand?
Arlindo, can I ask a question?
Mm.
If so, I'm trying to remember in my mind how this develops into, I think the expression is the Yana Karma Sannyas.
Yeah.
What is added? What is added for that? Or do you know what I'm saying?
Well,
Or is the right karma yoga with the knowledge behind it considered Yana Karma Sannyas, or what? I'm forgetting the distinction.
yeah. The sannyas is someone who has renounced. Okay, this is this. It's basically it's vairagya. It's detachment. It's renounce. So sannyas is someone is a renunciation. Okay, so there are two kinds of renunciations. You can renounce actions, and then you are karma sannyas. Okay, I mean, like in India, there in Tiruvannamalai, there are a lot of these swamis, these sadhus on the streets, and Production Road there especially. And then I have a friend of mine in India who had a small shop, and he had a lot of sadhus who were his friends. And one time I talking to him, I asked him, so tell me, my friend, I used to call him bro, he used to call me bro. I say, hey, bro, so these swamis there, these sadhus there, so do they meditate? Do they read the scripture? Do they do some sadhanas and so on? He looked at me and said, no, bro, no, bro. Lord, those swamis, those sannyas, they are laid up. They are laying sannyas. I say, what laying sannyas? Lay sannyas, they just like to lay down. You know, they are totally tamasic. They don't like to read. They don't like to meditate. They just like to lay down, and then eat once or twice a day, and then lay down. You know, so they have renounced action, but to renounce action to that extent did not add any spiritual value to their lives. You understand? They renounce society. They don't know. I don't want to participate for whatsoever reason. You know. And then, but it's not bringing any spiritual growth. So, but then there is another level of sannyas, which is to renounce not only actions, but to renounce the one that renounced action, you know, and that can only be done by yana, by discriminating the doer. Because I mean, I gave an example, which is it's a more like the sadhus of India is more like a social phenomenon. People, they are so poor, the government does not know what to do with millions of people, and then they just feed them once a day through all these non-profit organizations, you know, and then they keep them on the street with some orange clothes, you know, and then they die early because they don't have a medical assistance or anything, you know. But when you become a sannyas, a real sannyas, you go to an ashram, and you have to do certain practice, certain sadhanas, and so on. The first stage is, you know, I don't want to do any more job and work. I walked away from my job, my profession. I throw away my documents, and now I'm a sannyas. So you renounce karma. But yana karma sannyas is to renounce the one who has renounced karma. You understand? So you have to renounce the doer. In other words, you have to renounce the ego. You know, that is the spiritual work that is called yana karma sannyas. So you not only renounced doing things, but through your discrimination, your sadhana, your yana yoga, your studies, your contemplation, you understood that you are not the doer. So you renounce the one who has renounced action.
So you really need to get karma yoga in order to renounce. I mean, because that's kind of an active, ongoing renunciation, isn't it?
Yeah, I not long ago, a few days ago, I was listening to Paramarthananda when I do my morning walks, and he was talking about that. He was saying that that the householder, a karma yogi, is much better off than most people in the ashrams, you know, because people go there and they don't have enough sattva, you know, in their mind. And either they are too tamasic or they are too rajasic. If they are too tamasic, they want to lay down all day long. If they are too rajasic, they want to start creating sannyas associations, and they start fighting, dividing the groups and competing and all kinds of crazy things they do, you know. We say the best thing is to stay in the world and be a sannyas, you know. It's very interesting. I mean, it makes total sense when we really understand what Karma Yoga is all about. And it is karma that keeps the wheel of samsara turning. It's karma that waters the tree of samsara and produces its bitter fruits. Oh, nice. It's karma that waters. You remember we looked into the tree of samsara in the analogy? It is karma that waters the tree of samsara and keep all the results of actions manifest as the fruits, which are mostly bitter fruits because it never satisfies the bird. No? So the first thing we have to understand is that action is not the answer for moksha. But as I was just saying, action is the right thing, is the answer for mental preparation, mental purification, mental elevation. But for moksha, action will not be the answer. Discrimination and discrimination alone is the way to go. So when we come to the Vedanta, we also have to resist the tendency to make awareness an object. So this is very common, as we know. We are used to do things, to accomplish things, you know, to get things. We do actions to accomplish things, to get things, and to become something else, and so on. So we always have this object of accomplishment before us. You know, I'm just going, running for something. And this object, like, you know, it's like the carrot hanging in front of the, how do you say? That is always remain a few steps ahead. So we never get to the carrot. We have to resist the tendency to believe that awareness, consciousness, what I'm seeking, searching for is something out there. So we want to get it. Okay, you know, and I'm doing something to get to God, to become one with God, to become one with the self, to merge, and so on. To guard against this, the verse tells us that we not only have to resolve all objects in awareness, but we have to understand that all is but awareness. It's not that we're going to resolve the fact that, oh yes, there is awareness, there is consciousness. You know? No, I have to claim my identity as consciousness, as awareness. So I have to resolve the jiva into consciousness. You know? And usually there is a nice way, a gradual way to resolve the jiva in awareness as awareness. So we begin by resolving the jiva into Ishvara, understanding the relationship between jiva and Ishvara, you know, bringing Ishvara into account, and then understanding Ishvara, and then again and again we just offer our actions to Ishvara. We leave the results to Ishvara. You know, we know that Ishvara is the one managing everything, you know, and then we can live a quiet life, and in the process we develop peaceful and sharp and qualified intellect. The ego wants to make the self into an object. It can readily adopt a program of resolving objects into awareness as long as it can resolve awareness into the ego. Oh, how nice it is. The ego can readily adopt a program of resolves object. Okay, so now I have to discriminate the objects from the self. And now I have to resolve all the objects into the self. Oh, that's very easy. If I just have put them apart, now I can put them back together again. You know? And look what they say here. It can readily adopt a program of resolving all the objects back into awareness as long as it can resolve awareness into the ego. because the doer of this resolution now is the ego, and the ego wants to take, take the claim that, oh yes, okay, now I am an enlightened ego. Understand? I have resolved everything into awareness. First, I have separated everything from awareness. Now I resolved everything into awareness. So now I am the enlightened one. So everybody coming into the spiritual world, it does that. It's natural. The ego wants to become enlightened. The ego wants to resolve, to superimpose the jiva, the ego, into consciousness and say, I am an enlightened ego. But the ego is the biggest object. Is it so? Is that what it's saying? Which is the big object, the super object. Let me see what it means to say. It can readily adopt a program of resolve objects into awareness, so long that it can resolve awareness into the ego, which is the big object, the super object. And the ego is the biggest object. And the big, what happens to the ego, the intellect? It is an object, but it somehow it dress up as the subject. And with I am the ultimate subject. You understand? I am conscious. That's the danger of saying I am consciousness. If the ego is not really properly worked, through understanding, if the ego, the sense of I, the doer, the one who resolves, the one who thinks, the one who accomplishes, if this sense of doership, ownership is not really neutralized or canceled, and then even if some people, they have beautiful insights, understanding more, but if the ego is not neutralized, the ego can easily, take itself to be aware and say, oh yes, I am the ultimate subject and I am so proud of myself. He can even play humble, say, oh yes, I'm the most humble, but inside he say, oh, I have made it, and so on. You can see this kind of pride in a lot of other people who was not lucky enough to have the sense of the doership being cancelled. This karma yoga is very important as well, because it allows, in this process, allows the ego to be smoothed again and again until it becomes a wise ego. And then, what is a wise ego? It's a ego that understood, hey, Ishwara is in control here. In Mitya, Ishwara is in control. I'm just an instrument of Ishwara. I can understand my nature as the same nature of Ishwara and the same nature of the universe. My nature as consciousness, as Brahman, and so on. But it's a truly humble ego once the jiva has gone through this gradual process of mental purification, mental preparation, you understand? It has to be like that. Otherwise, there is a lot of room for what we call enlightenment sickness. It means to say some self-realization took place, but the ego was not yet neutralized, was not canceled. And then the ego is going to say, yes, I have made it, I got it, and so on. This is usually what the person who proclaims I am enlightened has done. The big object takes itself to be the subject and then say, yes, I am awareness and I have resolved everything into awareness. There is only me aware. But that's the ego saying that. The truth is that we can never become anything. We are what we are, always and forever. And that is what? Actionless, limitless, ordinary, as Ramji likes to say, simple awareness. We are what we are, always and forever. Actionless, limitless, ordinary, unconcerned awareness. To realize this, we are first advised to separate objects from awareness. Yes, we need to isolate, because why? Because the self apparently got confused with the object. So we need to do that. Then to resolve those objects and understand that there is only awareness appearing as objects, but there are no objects as well. Actually, the meaning of this resolution may not be all that clear. In fact, it may seem contradictory. If objects are separate from awareness, how can they be resolved back into awareness? So it appears to be a contradiction, because in the beginning we say, okay, there is such a meter, there is a subject and the object. You understand? There is the self and the not self appearing with all objects. So now we present duality. And then we say there is duality, but this duality, they got mixed up. The self got mixed up and confused with the not self. And then we need to separate these two. And we need to make a huge inventory and then go and say, no, this object, no. So we do that. And then we're gonna say, okay, now that you understand what is the subject, and now that you have claimed your identity as the subject, now that you are certain about your nature, identity as the subject, conscious existence, principle, which is not an experiencing entity. Now that you understood what you are, and now you are ready to understand that everything that appears, projects in the screen of your conscious existence is not apart from you. You understand? There's nothing apart from us. Everything is happening in our consciousness. You understand? So that's what it means to understand that there's nothing apart. It's just a superimposition, it's a projection, it's an appearance. Okay? So the meaning of this resolution may not be very clear. In fact, it may seem to be paradoxal. If objects are separate from awareness, if objects appear to be apart from awareness, how can be resolved? It's because they were never apart from awareness, you know? They appear to be something other than the conscious awareness, but they were not. They were just pictures in the screen of consciousness. Wouldn't such a resolution require that the separation performed by discrimination to be reversed? No. There's not question of reversed the original separation. You understand? Why? Because there was no attachment, there was nothing really attached that needs to be separated. This is just an appearance. These are just images on the screen of consciousness. Never apart from consciousness, but consciousness somehow thought that, you know, I am the object, beginning with the body-mind that appears in my conscious awareness. But in truth, there was nothing really real happening, nothing really other than myself, consciousness. So there is no question of reverse, you know? Why should we so assiduously distinguish the self from not self only to merge the two again? Why not to leave things as they are if at the end I have to bring them back? It's very simple. It's because we must clear up this confusion between what I am and the object that are printed in the screen of my consciousness, the object that are superimposed, that are project, that appears in my conscious awareness. So we need to do that just to undo this confusion. We need to clear up this confusion that the objects, that we are the objects. Once we know that we are not the object, we are the subject, and then we no longer have problems with object. Why it's so problematic to believe that we are the object, and why we need to be done with that assumption? Because the moment that we attach ourselves to objects, we feel what? We feel limited. You know, we feel vulnerable. Yeah? We feel bound by time, by space, by properties, by form, and everything. So it is a huge problem to identify with the object. That's why we go through all this trouble. And then once we understood that our nature is consciousness and free and independent of all objects that appear, project on the screen of my consciousness. And then I have no problems with objects. Why? Because I know the objects are here, but I'm not the objects. You understand? I'm no longer defining myself as the objects and by the objects. So the objects are not impacting me anymore once I have undone this confusion between the subject and the object. Because we must clear up the confusion that we are the objects, and the objects exist independently of awareness. And moreover, the idea that the objects are there to complete myself, because that is the assumption that creates so much suffering. You understand? We need to undo all these assumptions which are imposed by Maya, avidya, this ignorance. Resolving objects is very simple, but not easy. So discriminate the objects is simple, but not easy, because when we try to do that, the object seems to be sticking to consciousness, to the subject, like the previous commentary said. Now, bring the objects back and resolve them into awareness. Again, it's simple, but it's not that easy, There are no objects apart from the thoughts of objects. This is something that is subtle, and most people have difficulty to understand that there are no objects apart from a thought of object. In fact, the object is a byproduct of thought. We think that the thought comes from the object, because when I see a cup, and then I say, oh, thought cup came. No, when I see this cup, it never comes like a pen or frying pan. It never comes a thought frying pan, because I say a cup. So we think that the thought comes from the cup, but in truth, all objects come from thought. And everything exists in the macrocosmic realm of potential, of knowledge, of seeds. Thought is from the subtle that everything grows fast to become the physical universe. So every time that there is an object, there is a thought associated with this object, and the object is not apart from the thought of the object. This is something that Ramji likes to teach very often. Many times he says something like that. Okay, if you think that there is a difference between your wife and the thought of your wife, so let's look into that. So you think of your wife. You think your wife is not a thought. Okay, so your wife is somewhere and you are here, and now you don't think about your wife for one day, for 24 hours. So where is your wife in your life? Understand? So there is no wife, right? So by the moment that you think my wife, and then my wife appears in my mind, you understand? So the object is always attached to the thought of the object. So in every moment, it's like two sides of the same coin. They are known and experienced in awareness as they appear in the mind. So they appear in the mind and they experience. They experience physically, and they experience as a memory of previous experience in relation to that object. But there is a thought, there is an object. The thoughts define the object, and the objects are linked to the thought. It's just like the egg and the chicken, Thought produces the object, and the object reinforces the thought of the object. There is nothing that is an absolute cause and absolute effect. Cause and effect is a cyclical phenomenon. Understand? And it begins, when we talk in terms of the beginning, we go from the causal body You know, the subtler from the gross, and then from the gross it comes back to the subtle, because everything breaks down again and again. The mind cannot know an object unless it is illumined by awareness. So we have awareness, we have the mind, and they have the object. The object appears in the mind, and the mind can only know the object if it is backed up by awareness, illumined by awareness, the self. Therefore, there is no separation between the thought of the object and the awareness as well. So every object appears as a thought in the mind, and the mind is never apart from consciousness. So where we are moving into the teaching of the location of object. So where is the object ultimately? Every object is just a thought in the screen of consciousness through the mind, of course. It appears in the mind, and the mind exists as another object, absolutely not apart from consciousness. It is backed up. It's illumined by consciousness. Okay? There is no separation between the thought of the object and the awareness in which it appears. There is no separation between the thought of the object and the mind. The mind exists not apart from consciousness. Consciousness is what illumines the mind. Therefore, the object appears in awareness and not apart from the awareness, consciousness. Therefore, if the object is actually the thought of the object is nothing but awareness. You see how beautiful this logic? So, after all, if the object is actually a sort of object and it exists not apart from the mind, which not apart from consciousness, and then what's happening here? The object is nothing but awareness, is nothing but consciousness appearing as an object. And I am, so we have resolved the object, the cup, in consciousness as consciousness. That's why the verb says in consciousness as consciousness. Everything resolves in consciousness as consciousness. And I am awareness. Therefore, if the object is actually the thought of the object is nothing but consciousness. And I am consciousness. Therefore, what is the final conclusion? Therefore, the objects are me. There is no separation or distinction between myself and the object. So what it's leading us to, there is only consciousness. All there is consciousness, and I am that. And this is pure logic. In this manner, we resolve everything into consciousness because everything appears only due to my conscious existence and appears as a projection in my conscious existence, as a thought, which is the same thing as an object and appears in the screen of consciousness, not apart from consciousness. There is no difference between consciousness and object. There is no difference between I consciousness and I object. Everything is consciousness. Therefore, the objects are me. In this manner, all objects are resolved in consciousness as consciousness. That's why it was saying that resolving objects into consciousness is very simple. But it's not easy because again and again, we're going to see the object as what? As out there. And my consciousness in here. No, that's the play of Maya. Maya produces duality. Right? And the object is away from my mind. But nowadays, there are a lot of physical, even mathematical kind of analysis that proves that the objects are not out there, but they are just appearing, in the mind. Somebody sent me a video about this guy that I watch a little bit. It's very interesting. It's based on mathematics, calculus. Therefore, the objects are me. Resolving objects is not easy because of the deeply ingrained tendency to take perception to be reality. We take perception of names and forms to be reality, as something out there apart from myself, something different than myself. And in the beginning of this discrimination, we say, yes, you have to discriminate you from the object. But now in the end, we say, yes, but you know, in the end, you are the object and the objects are consciousness. Everything is only consciousness. Resolving the objects is not easy because of the deeply ingrained tendency to take perception to be reality. As this analysis implies, there are only apparent objects, which is contrary to our most fundamental notions of objects, that they are real and they are away from us. So that is the power of Maya, the greatest, trickiest, you know, that makes the object appear out there, while everything is just, you know, soaked in consciousness, because consciousness is that which pervades everything. Everything is soaked in the space. The space is soaked in mithya. Mithya is soaked in consciousness. So there is nothing separate from me, consciousness. Everything is just appearing in me. But contrary to that, we believe that the objects are real and they exist away from us, away from consciousness, away from the mind. In fact, the very notion of a witness of objects is a concession to ignorance, a way of speaking that helps us to overcome the habit of seeing duality. So the very notion of witnessing an object is a concession to ignorance, a way of speaking that helps us to overcome a habit of seeing duality. Once we realize we are the witness, the next step is to realize there is nothing to witness, no separate reality to be observed. Therefore, there is no question of a witnessing principle, because a witnessing principle implies duality. A witnessing seer and a witnessed object. But once we really looked into that, we understand that this duality between the witnessing principle, witnessing the objective world, is a concession to the ignorance, because in truth there is only consciousness. And if it witnesses anything, it's just witnessing itself, because there is nothing other than consciousness, apparently witnessing names and forms. Once we realize we are the witness, the next step is to realize that the witness is the only thing in town. There is nothing else. There is only consciousness. The witness is the only principle. There is nothing to witness. There is nothing. There is no objective reality to be witnessed. It's just an appearance. There's nothing separate to be observed. If there were, duality would be true. If objects would be true, if there would be objects to be witnessed, and then the nature reality would never be non-duality, and then the scripture would be lying to us. That's the point. If there was object to be witnessed, duality would be true, and non-duality would be a fiction from cooked up by the rishis, by the scriptures. This verse tells us that through discrimination we can ultimately realize discriminating. We begin to discriminate the subject from the object. We can ultimately realize not the distinction of subject and object, but the fact that there is only one principle operating, which is conscious awareness, conscious existence. So once we go through this process of discriminating Satya and Mithya, and then we understand that there is no Satya and Mithya. So when we say that there are two orders of reality, And then we have to correct ourselves and say there are two orders of reality of the one non-dual reality. There is only one reality in truth. You understand? But it appears as two, satya and mithya, subject and object. When we say that satya and mithya, as two orders, we have to say it's two orders of the one non-dual reality called satya, consciousness. But the fact is that there is only awareness, looking at awareness as awareness. So this is our situation. There is only consciousness, awareness, looking at itself, appearing as all these names and forms and colors and so on, and properties and functions and events. We look at awareness as awareness. We don't want to look at awareness as the objects of awareness and still remain separate. In the beginning we remain separate as the subject, and then in the end we have to understand that there is not even more a question of separate myself from the object, because everything is just me. So that's the end result of this process. So anybody would like to say something? Oh, there is somebody else here. Oh, there is Ronald. Okay. Ronald is quiet there in the back.
Okay, Arlindo, we say objects are just thoughts, and yet a thought is also just an object.
Yeah.
I understand, that everything resolves back into consciousness and nothing can be apart from consciousness.
Yeah, but you
getting the object.
Yeah.
Making the objects just into thoughts, because an object apparently exists as a real apparent thing.
Well, I mean, the point of...
Because if it was only a thought, then... Hold on, just let me finish a moment, please. There needs to be an object for there to be a thought.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I understand that everything resolves back into consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the easy part of this equation to understand.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let me know when you're done, because there is your voice keeps stopping. There is a time lag. There is a
okay.
Again. So can I talk now?
Yeah. No. I was just trying to hold on. I was just trying to get across the point that an object.
Yeah.
A thought is just an object. Also, it's like a catch-22 situation.
Yeah. Your voice keeps cutting in any case. But anyhow, so when we talk about suppose your wife died, okay? So does your wife who died still exist in your mind or not? It does.
Occasionally.
It does, yeah. So let's suppose your wife is alive, but for some reason you don't think about your wife. Does your wife exist for you when you don't think? No, it does not exist. Suppose tomorrow she dies and then you think of her, so the wife still lives in your mind as a sort of the object called the wife. You understand? So sometimes it's going to be present as a physical object, and sometimes it will be present as a memory, as a thought in your mind in respect to that object called my wife. You understand? So the wife is the object, but there is a thought of the wife. So all of the objects and the thoughts of objects, they come from two souls. I mean, actually, there are three sources of object, of thoughts object. One of them is when the objects present themselves to us. But not always. A lot of the time, the object presents themselves to us, Mark, but we don't pay attention because we are not holding the thought of that object. What I mean to say, a lot of the time, I mean, if we are somewhere, there are many objects crossing our front, you know, there are so many things. But the only object that are going to appear in your mind is the object that I grab because I have a sort of the object in my mind, just to begin with. You agree with that? So
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so the objects and the sort of object, they may come, they appear as they come from the exterior, you know, from outside, you know, it's come from the field, boom, it appears in my mind. And then I was somehow looking for this object, I identify and say, yes, this sort of this object. You know, I have attracted this object because I was already contemplate or find a new girlfriend, a new boyfriend or whatever. And then when I see that boyfriend, I go, okay. So it came from the field, but I was already working on this thought object. So another way that the object appears to us is from our vasanas, our causal body. We have all those thoughts already in there. And when we are born, we are born with all these seeds of thoughts, all these mental impressions, you know, this memory, these tiny bit memories. They are all thoughts. Everything is thought in the vasana load, in the causal body. Understand? So we have these thoughts that come from the causal body, from the vasanas, and then boom, they hit us, thought object. You know? So we have a thought object that comes from my unconscious mind. We have a thought object that appears to come from the field, but actually there were many other thought objects coming, but I grabbed this one because, you know, I was already holding it in my, as a tendency to see and experience that thought. And then there is another kind of thought object that is a thought object that is not coming from my vasana and it's not coming from the field, but it is a deliberate kind of thought object, for example. So no, I don't want to leave my mind thinking on its own according to its vasanas, and I don't want to think the thoughts of everything that shows before my sense organs, you know, perceptive. When I perceive objects, and then okay, you know, I'm a slave here, you know, I'm pushed around by whatsoever appears, you know, through my sense organ, or I am all the time experiencing all these thought objects that are coming from my vasana. No, I want to think deliberately. I will do my sadhana. I want to educate my mind to think aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, aham brahmasmi, as an example, okay? So I'm making an exercise or whatsoever mantra, you know, whatsoever object of meditation. I'm trying to create a thought that is deliberately produced rather than coming from my vasanas or come from the field, okay? But the fact of these teachings about a thought not being apart from the object and the object not being apart from the thought, is that there is no object that was not produced by thought in the same place, in the first place. The same way that there is no thought without an object. That's why I said that it's a cyclical thing. You understand? We, for effects of the teachings, for the understanding, we say that it all comes from the causal body, and the cause the physical reality. Cause the subtle and the physical. But the ultimate truth is there is no absolutely cause, because the causal body causes the subtle and the physical and the objects. But it requires the objects, so that objects, again, they become the thoughts of objects. In other words, everything goes from vasanas to subtle thoughts about objects until it manifests as object, until it breaks down to remain imprinted in the macrocosm causal body, you know, until it again keeps manifesting. The whole thing about Brahman bringing forth this universe, it comes in the same principle, you know. The universe manifests, but how about this universe? It exists in the mind of God. Understand? It exists as thought. And this thought of the universe, with everything that exists in the universe, exists in the mind of God, in the macrocosm, causal body of the universe. You know? So it exists there and exists in the subtle mind of Ishvara, you know, and then it manifests. So now, what is the difference between the thought of the universe and the universe? No, the universe comes out of the thought of the universe, and the universe is going to feed back the thought. It goes from the manifest reality, comes back to the causal reality. You understand? It's a cyclical thing. There is nothing that is an absolute. From another angle, so we know that we are vasana machines. Jiva is a factory of producing vasana. And the vasana is going to produce a thought, a desirable thought or a fearful thought. Okay? And then that fearful or desirable thought is going to compel us to act. And then we're going to act to try to gain or accomplish that object of desire or fear. Okay? And then once we do that, what happens with the vasana? You understand? We are just producing or nourishing or reinforcing or maintaining a vasana. So now, is the vasana causing my action, or is my action causing the vasana? You understand? We can say, no. It's the vasana. But in truth, Mark, there is no absolute cause, because the entire universe is cyclical. That's why we never come to an answer about what came first, the chicken or the egg. You understand? Why? Because it's not the way this universe works. You understand? There is no beginning of creation. It's a cyclical thing. It exists as thought, and then it appears as an object. It exists as the egg, and then it appears as the chicken later on, and then dies. You know, it's again and again. It's just a constant cycle, you know, going like that. Does it help, Mark?
It helps a great deal. Thank you, Arlindo. Yeah, it helps a great deal.
Thank you. That's a good question.
So what we're saying, basically, okay, now enough.
No, you can say. You're saying basically?
We're not saying the object actually doesn't exist in the Mithya realm. What we're saying is it doesn't exist apart from the thought of it. They exist simultaneously.
Yeah. It exists apart. And if we really look into it, as I was explaining before, it appears that the cup came from nowhere. But you know, for example, here, there are so many objects. My wife says that my desk here seems to be a war field, because there are all kinds of things in here. You understand? So when I come here, there are all kinds of objects. There are maybe 20, 30 objects on this small table. So I run my eyes through these, but I always see what I want to see. You know, there are 30 objects here, but I always see what I want to see. You know what I mean? So I somehow direct myself to the objects. Nothing happens by any chance, you know. It's the same thing like with anything. I mean, that's why there is all these concepts of the law of attraction and so on, because somehow we attract things in our life according to the thoughts we engage, you know. It's not that we have the power to control the field and attract only what we want, but that principle operates, you know. We're going to be pulled to the objects that we hold in our minds. That's the point. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a good session. We begin next week, verse 46. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, my friends. So we meet again soon, Ishwara willing.
Thank you.
Thank you for this beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you very much.
God bless.
Yes.
Ciao.
Ciao.